Welcome to YLG TV. YLG TV is a production of the Urban Land Institute Los Angeles Young Leaders Group to give some one-on-one level insight and advice to our membership. YLG is a group of young up-and-coming professionals in Los Angeles at all different levels of their career who are looking to learn from those who have achieved great success here in the city. Today we're here with Janet Marie Smith, Senior Vice President of Planning and Development for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Ms. Smith joined the Dodgers in August 2012 after years with a number of different ball clubs, including the Baltimore Orioles, the Boston Red Sox, and the Atlanta Braves. As a major part of the team that helped shape Baltimore's Oriole Park at Camden Yards, Ms. Smith is responsible for helping begin the wave of new Major League ballpark construction that contributed to urban revival and renewal in baseball cities. She's one of the most influential people and respected people in Los Angeles, helping shape policy at Dodger Stadium, which will guide the future of the Dodgers and Los Angeles. Ms. Smith, thank you for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me.
So you're in charge of planning and development for one of the most famous baseball clubs, playing at one of the most iconic stadiums here in the United States. Would you explain for us exactly what you do for the Dodgers, and in the beginning when you realized you could make a career out of this?
Well, the career was a happy accident, but we'll come back to that. My role here with the Dodgers is to oversee the improvements to Dodger Stadium. So I help our team figure out what it is we want to do, what are our priorities, whether it's, as it was last year, upgrading the infrastructure so that we can have enough power on site to do the kinds of concessions, Wi-Fi, scoreboard, sound systems that a 21st century stadium ought to have. Our 50-year-old equipment just wasn't getting it done. Or whether it was the clubhouse and figuring out some way to double the size of a 1962 clubhouse so that our players would have something that gave them a competitive edge, or whether it's the things that our fans feel every time they come here. And our overarching goal is to make Dodger Stadium what it was when it debuted, which was one of the great marvels of this century. I mean, it is, as you say, it's just an incredible place, and it's so unique among baseball clubs. So, so back to the what do you do every day? So we figure out, okay, what are our priorities, and that involves a number of different departments and people who have knowledge of that area, and then selecting architects, selecting contractors, putting together the design team, and managing the project to the finish.
And so was there a particular issue or an event that triggered your desire to be in development, or the baseball in particular?
Well, I've always really enjoyed managing projects and managing big, large, civic scale projects. Not necessarily things in the public sector or the private sector or the public-private partnerships. I mean, I get all that. But I just like the civic realm. And I was living here in Los Angeles in the 1980s and was interested in going back to the East Coast, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I looked for a project, not a job. I needed to pay the bills, but I was looking for a project, not a job. And I'd always been a baseball fan, loved coming to games here at Dodger Stadium. And I went to Memorial Stadium in Baltimore on a trip to the East Coast, and fans around me were talking about this new ballpark they were going to build downtown. And at the time, I thought, oh, that's a bummer. I really like Memorial Stadium. What if I need a new one? But then I had a eureka moment several months later that I would work on that, because it was the first time a team had talked about moving into an urban setting and being a part of the downtown renaissance. And I had known Baltimore from my previous years on the East Coast as being a city that had really focused on how to reinvent itself and reclaim the industrial waterfront and change the definition of a city to be something that people would find appealing in today's terms. And so I wrote a letter to Larry Lucchino, who was president of the Orioles, and the stars were aligned, and I ended up moving to Baltimore and worked on what we now know as Oriole Park at Camden Yards. And I never thought about making a career of it, but that's the way the last 20 years have been for me.
Fantastic. So baseball author and well-known political commentator George Will actually called Camden Yards, which you just spoke of, one of the most important developments in baseball in the post-war era, along the lines of Jackie Robinson and free agency. Can you give the brief story of, like you were saying, how Camden Yards came to be and why it stood the test of time even 20 years later?
Well, that's probably the most rewarding thing, is that 20 years later we look at it as the benchmark that you referred to. Well, when I say the stars were aligned, they weren't just aligned for me, they were aligned for Baltimore and for baseball. The governor, William Dallas Schaefer, had selected the site, and he was the one that really wanted it to be in downtown Baltimore. He was the former mayor of the city. He just wore his passion for the city on his sleeve. Anytime he could direct love or money to the city of Baltimore as governor of Maryland, he did that. And so he selected the site in the heart of downtown Baltimore, and the president I mentioned a moment ago, Larry Lucchino, had been observing that the parks with the greatest attendance were Wrigley Field and Fenway Park, the two smallest parks in all of Major League Baseball. And so he got onto this idea that instead of building another multi-purpose stadium or even another single-purpose stadium, that we should be building a ballpark, something along the lines, the size and the character of Wrigley Field or Fenway Park. And had those two things not happened concurrently, either we would have had a cute little old park out in the cornfield somewhere, or we would have wound up with yet another multi-purpose stadium in the downtown setting. And so it was those two gentlemen who really set the tone for making that happen. And once Camden Yards opened, it happened at a time when so many teams were looking to leave their multi-purpose facilities and were looking to convince themselves and the cities that they served that there was rationale in building a single-purpose venue. And I worried for the first 10 years that, what if we were wrong? What if this proved to be a fad that didn't stand the test of time, because there were so many parks built sort of in that mode 10 years after Camden Yards opened. I think sitting here today, since Baltimore Orioles debuted in 1992, I think something like 24 out of the 30 teams have new parks. So they are all sisters of each other, and hopefully we got it right, or at least right enough that they will live for several generations.
I think so. Part of what has made Camden Yards so popular is sort of the mixing of the new beautiful stadium with the history and with the sort of old-time allure of baseball. Dodger Stadium is now considered, an old-time park, as you said, 24 of 32 teams. So have the plans for the upgrades to Dodger Stadium itself, and ultimately maybe the parking lot, have always been sort of centered around the character-defining features of the stadium itself and its sort of old-time? Very
much. And we're the third oldest in Major League Baseball now, right behind Fenway and Wrigley, 1962. Right. And so when the ownership group that I work for took over 2 years ago, and I had a chance to work for Stan Kasten for the second time, I worked for him in Atlanta, so it's a treat to be reunited with him. One of the primary goal in Stan's mind was to celebrate the uniqueness of this park. It doesn't come with the threat of being torn down the same way Fenway Park, which I had a chance to work on for many years, did. But it comes feeling a bit tired and uncertain. And the Guggenheim partners, Mark Walters and Todd Bowley and Magic Johnson and Peter Guber, that group got together and said, look, this is so unique. Everybody else has gone and done the Baltimore, San Diego, AT&T thing. Look at what we got. Look at what we have here. And so it's no accident that the architects that we selected to work on this include Brenda Levin and Associates, best known for preservation work, things like the Griffith Park Observatory, the Wilton Theater, the Bradbury Building, but with a sensitivity about this building, even though we're doing as much addition as we are renovation to Dodger Stadium, it is, as you say, all in the character of those 1960s materials and the 1960s designs, and we don't want it to be cute. It's not meant to be a movie set. It's meant to be a place we really come to enjoy. But Stan has had us really focus on the fact that we've got these beautiful views of the San Gabriel Mountains in one direction, beautiful views of downtown in the other direction, and how do we create moments in and around Dodger Stadium to really celebrate that?
And regarding those renovations and upgrades, it seems like that's been sort of a yearly occurrence during the off-season the last couple of years. So what's happened this past off-season that's going on right now, and what are the future plans for Dodger Stadium and the parking lot and surrounding areas?
Well, the Dodger faithful will know that our most public thing that we did last year, besides the scoreboards and sound systems, were to go through each level and take out the last few rows of seats so that we could widen the concourse, create standing rooms and sort of social areas where people can mill around. Mia Lair and Associates worked with Brenda Levin to do plazas outside the park so that every entry, which used to just be a gate that you transverse from the parking lot through the gate, and now you're in the stadium, is now a place in and of itself with a lot of focus on the landscape and the way that we could draw the beautiful plant material from Elysian Park into this very park-like setting, building on something that Walter O'Malley started 50 years ago. And we did the plaza on the top deck and the reserve levels last year. Those, you know, golly, that must be 30,000 seats, and those fans hadn't seen any significant upgrades since the 1980s. So we wanted them to feel the love. We did that first. And this year we're doing the entryways and new plazas just over the bullpens for those fans who sit in the pavilion field and loge level, so that there's a more exciting entry experience for them. As a part of that, we have these big bars that overlook the bullpen. On either side, we have a Tommy Lasorda's Italian bistro that we're putting together. We've got a big open-air barbecue on the left field side, so we're looking to create the kind of amenities here at Dodger Stadium that new parks enjoy while keeping the character of this 1962 space.
Absolutely. And sort of on a larger scale, and we sort of briefly discussed it earlier, in your experience, how has sort of stadium redevelopment, stadium construction led to revitalization of urban areas and renewal of sort of downtrodden areas?
Well, I think in the 60s, sports teams and the cities who were hosting them used the game. 25 years, the approach has had a very different attitude of go into an urban environment, use it the same way, particularly in baseball, it was used in the early 1920s to add character and pizzazz to a place, give something back by virtue of the fact that we host 81 games, and using it to redefine the way we use cities. You know, cities are no longer necessarily our financial centers or the hubs that they were a generation ago, but people coming together is still a very important thing, and sports are all about people coming together.
And lastly, what would be your advice to a young planner or developer in the making? Is there anything that you would, you know, advise a young professional to do to prepare themselves?
You know, I have huge admiration for those who work as architects and planners, and that's what my degrees are in, is architecture and planning. But the job I have and the career I've had doesn't fit any of the things that you expect to do when you're in school or when you look at traditional jobs. And I've just loved it. And so I think there's always a little bit of me that wants to say, just follow your heart, you know, just follow your passions and make your own career. Don't wait for the job opening to come to you. Go decide what you want to do and create a place to do it.
Absolutely, that's great advice. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining us and being part of it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.